for a great meeting. And so now we're really very excited. Let me start by introducing myself. I'm Gigi Godwin. I'm President and CEO of the Montgomery County Chamber of Commerce. And it's my pleasure to welcome all of our board members and our advisory board, as well as members and invited guests. And so I'm very happy. I hope you can all hear because I know we've got a little bit of feedback. Today's presentation, I'm so excited about this topic, Leading Forward, Strategy, Talent, and Civility with Richard Davis, President and Chief Executive Officer of Make-A-Wish America, and also known to so many as former Executive Chairman and CEO of U.S. Bancorp. I do need to mention to all of you that as a reminder, we are recording the session. We do make a record of it. And so I just want you to all be aware your being here is consent to be recorded. And we're very happy to have you all join us. And I want you to know that we're going to post this on our website. During the presentation, please send us your questions by using the chat box. And now, before we actually introduce our esteemed guest speaker, it's my pleasure to turn the rest of our introductions over to our board chair, M&T Bank Group Vice President, Lowell Yoder. Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Gigi. We're excited to continue our great series of nationally recognized guest speakers on important topics that help our board's thought leaders. And you've heard this before, anticipate and adapt to an ever-changing national and global economy. But before I introduce today's speaker, I want to just remind you that we have some great presentations that are coming up. On February 24th board meeting, we'll have a presentation on the economic imperative and opportunity of our increasingly multicultural economy. And Gigi and I have spent a lot of time looking at this. When you start to look at the demographics and the statistical things that are happening and where purchasing power is going, it's so important to be able to address that, your business strategies on where the world is headed. And that's what we're going to cover in that particular topic. And then on March 30th, we will bring back the Richmond Federal Reserve Bank Chairman, Tom Barkin, to reflect on new opportunities and the new administration. And he was very highly rated as a speaker the last time around. And I think it'd be a very good time for him to come on board again. And now it's my pleasure to introduce our guest speaker and a special guest. And please join me in welcoming Leslie Creedon, President and CEO of Make-A-Wish Mid-Atlantic. And Leslie, I where I live at Montgomery Road, which I walk by your office building every day when I walk my dog. So I can almost see your office from where we are. So please, if you could, turn on your camera and unmute so that we can welcome you.
Hi, everybody. Thank you. Thank you for the introduction, Lowell. As Lowell said, I'm the president and CEO of the Make-A-Wish chapter here in the Mid-Atlantic. We are proudly headquartered in Montgomery County and have been in Montgomery County for 40 years. We have many Montgomery County residents and business people on our board who serve as wish granting volunteers, including Ben Wu, who's on the call today. I can see him. Ben recently joined our board of directors. And we work in partnership with philanthropists in the business community in Montgomery County to grant the wish of every eligible child in the entire state of Maryland, DC, and Northern Virginia. So thank you for having me tonight. And for those of you I don't know and who don't know Make-A-Wish being active in your community, I hope there's an opportunity for us to follow up and work together in the future.
Thank you very much, Leslie. Great to have you on board here. And now, please join me in a warm welcome for our guest speaker, a thought leader whose influence extends well beyond his storied career in banking. And one of the ways we accelerate your success is by providing the right information at the right time from the right experts. And today's presentation is relevant to all participants because every business is looking to find new strategies, talent, and ways to diversify their business and boost our region's economy. So now please join me in welcoming our esteemed guest speaker, Richard Davis, President and Chief Executive Officer of Make-A-Wish America, and former Executive Chairman and CEO of U.S. Bancorp. And I think what we're going to plan to do is, I think this presentation will be kind of broken up into 3 segments. And at the end of those segments, we will ask for, questions or engaging with the participants here to give it a little extra sense of interest. So Richard, well, you're in Phoenix, and you're probably 2 hours behind us, but it's probably a little warmer than it is here. But welcome.
Thank you, Lowell. Thank you, Gigi, and hi, Leslie. Yeah, but it's not happy hour here yet, so I'm going to withhold any celebration that you might already imbibe at this point in the day. First of all, thank you for the work you do. I've had a chance to study the cohort here of the MCCC, and Gigi and Lowell did a wonderful job of bragging about this group. And having banked most of my life, most small businesses, I got to tell you, community leaders, civic leaders, government leaders, you are the fabric that keep this whole America moving forward. But I will tell you what we've lost in the translation is the stitching between the fabric is the not-for-profits. And having been in for-profit my entire life until 2 years ago, I don't think I really understood the implications of just how the fabric of the community is woven together by the threads of these not-for-profits. Make-A-Wish happens to be one of them, but any and all of the organizations in your communities, and some of you are part of those, that do for others what allows the rest of you to do what you need to do, creates the community, and community is to commune and to be together and to create an orderly government. And so I say this to you because right now as we're speaking, there's an organization that's driving people to and from the doctor who don't have cars. And there are people right now that are reading tape recorded messages of books for kids who can't see. And there are people like Leslie who are working with the medical community to find children who need hope at a point in their life that they'll never need it more. And so while we all go along our day to do what we're vested and responsible for, not only for our community, but for our neighbors, promise me you'll take an extra pause and think about those community leaders and partners in the not-for-profit space that are doing the good work of making your community what it can be. And I say that because when I joined from the bank, one of my first warnings from myself and everyone was, don't be that for-profit guy in a not-for-profit world. And I'd served, it turns out, 11 boards of not-for-profit in my banking career, never had run one. But I don't think I understood that as well as when I got here. And here's a surprise. It isn't that different. That is not a true statement. The issue is the mission is maybe unique and different and often aligned with passion. Say at the bank, it was shareholders. At M&T, it's shareholders, but at Make-A-Wish, it's kids. But you still have to have the business acumen, the ability to forecast where you're headed, and have the ability and the courage to go find more people to support your mission so you can deliver it. And so honestly, I wish somebody had told me that a couple of years ago, because I was ready for the whole reverse mindset. And I kept reversing it, finding out it really wasn't reversed. It was very much the same set of skills and needs, but the mission is uniquely different. So our shareholders are to take everything we have and put it back into the kids and into a sustainable future. Each of you has a uniquely different role to play. And as you think about it, what I wanted to cover as we talk today, and by the way, my credentials are just that I got invited to talk to you. So you can run quietly away if you'd like. But what I want to cover with you is some experience that I've gained in over 40 years, and particularly having run the 5th largest bank through the recession. I took over 6 months before the recession. So nothing is as predictable and any less predictable than it is today. So I thought I would coin our conversation leading in this kind of new time, this new world. And much as we think it's never been this crazy and this uncertain, I'm pretty sure my parents, who were born in the teens, thought that when the Beatles came and drugs were everywhere and people were doing rock and roll, the end was near. So I think we all have our version of the window of time that seems that it's coming to an end. But post this issue on social injustice, post this political unrest like we've never seen in recent days, and during a pandemic of proportions that we've never have seen, well, those are pretty new times. So I do think the first call out is, how do you lead in moments like that? So I'm going to start with the first one, which is the word leading. Because in the leadership part, I know you know all this, but you cannot be a leader if you don't have a follower. And the followership is what makes you the leader. And that is a trusted position that they give you. So the first and foremost is in times of uncertainty, people want to be a sense of confidence and calm and certainty. Now, say nothing you can't deliver, but create that sense of stability, whatever is possible, for those who follow you so that they can feel that they are being led into the next, if you will, chapter on somebody who's thinking ahead and thinking on their behalf. So the first word is the leading on this point, because leading isn't to be a singular leader, it's to find those who have the skills, bring them with you, and lead forward. The second part about leading is checking for understanding. There's the old adage we all joke about, what if I was leading, turned around and they were all gone? Well, that's because you haven't checked along the way. So the second part is to understand what are the needs, in this case, the concerns or the fears or the optimism of your team, and ask them. Don't guess, find out what's on their mind, and then make sure that you can tend to those issues. And if you're not skilled or talented in that area, bring someone in who is. But the last part is, and I think Gigi wanted me to cover this, is instead of setting hard and fast goals, set directions. So I want to give you my rationale for that. One of the things I hate most about the new world as an old guy is the GPS. And so I'll ask you to all remember, by show of hands of those I can see, how many of you remember going to the auto club or maybe with your parents to map out on a big map with a big marker your trip? Okay, and it was called a triptych for those of you who want trivia. And I love the triptych because what we don't realize we were doing is saying to get from A to B, it's not just this line on a map. We're going to cross over this highway, this bridge, this mountain range. And by the way, if you want to stop along the way, there's lots of options. Instead, we say, I need to get to B. I put it in the computer and it tells me how to get to B. I'm completely unaware of what I'm passing. I have no interest or knowledge of what's around me. I just want to get to B. And the reason that matters is because I've lost context. If I wanted to enrich the experience, make a decision change, stop overnight somewhere else, it's a very easy way to just describe how leading in new times has a lot to do with leading with intent to go into a direction, but not with a certainty for the goal. So I would have said this a year ago, but based on the triumvirate of issues we're dealing with, which I just mentioned, you could never be more wrong than to set a goal right now. You couldn't be more wrong because you have no idea what all these moving parts will contribute. Many of you are in business where you have to set goals and objectives for this current calendar year. I'm on a number of boards as well. And for the first time in my history, in two of my corporate Fortune 100 boards, we have set our goals this year in two halves, the first half and the second half of 21, because we don't think we're smart enough to see 12 months into the future in this current environment. And we want to pivot. If we're doing really well, we want to capture that and add to it. If we're struggling because of something we couldn't have predicted, we'll reset the bar and then set a higher expectation from there. But I say that because directions are less comfortable. They're ambiguous and they sound a little weaker. But in times like this, it's the strength of courage, the strength of understanding the lack of clarity, and leading people to believe that you will pivot and adjust along the way. So you think about this in a sports analogy, and one of my favorite sports is basketball for this reason, because you and I could be on the team, we're on the court, and there's 5 of us. And we have the ball, and so right now all 5 of us are offensive players, and we're trying to get the ball in the other guy's basket. But in the matter of a quick rebound or a quick change of position, they grab the ball, and instantly the 5 of us are on defense, and we're in positions we weren't expected to be in literally, so we have to reposition ourselves and wait for it, not worry about just us, but contextualize where all the other 4 players are, where the other 5 from the other team are, and where do I place myself on this court of 10. Now, what I love about basketball too is it's fast. There's not a whole lot of time in between plays, but most sports have either periods in hockey or halftimes. And I'm going to call us kind of in a halftime moment. So if you think about halftime, think about the buzzer going down 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And both parties, both competing teams leave the court or the field into different areas. And they go in with a few minutes of time with the coach and the coach staff to say, let's regroup. Here, let's pause. What do we know? We know the conditions on the court. We know the spirit of the referees. We know the favor of the fans. We know the air level in the balls. We have all the data we're going to have for the second half. And we're either ahead, so let's replicate what got us here, or we're behind, let's adjust and be ready to come out and win. But what's so special is at halftime, everybody thinks they can still win. And yet nobody has the evidence to prove it. And the people in Vegas are betting along the way to hope that they get it right. And so what I'm saying to you is we're not at the end of this. We're not even at the beginning. We're in the middle. And if you can pause long enough as a leader and help your team realize that first and foremost, you have their best interest at heart, not just your product or your customers, but your employees. Secondly, that you're prepared to work in the ambiguity of what's happening next, and you welcome them to that. And then lastly, help them realize that we're going to adjust as we see things quickly. We'll pivot as we will, and we have every reason to come out of this a winner. And so it's a very simple thought process, but I do think it's important. And I'll close this topic with this, and we're going to chat about it here for a minute. When I inherited my role as CEO of this bank with 80,000 people, you always stop and say, well, do I stand for anything unique and different, or do I just play the same play? And my predecessor, who was a very good banker, had a very strong opinion that shareholders were first, customers were next important, and employees were necessary. He wasn't a bad guy. That's just how he saw the world. I know it sounds like a heathen, but actually it didn't sound like that when he said it. I came in and realized that I was going to flip the triangle and say that the employees are first, not because it curries favor, because that could be a risk. And therefore, if the employees are deeply engaged, honestly and completely connected to the mission, they will create experiences that the customers will welcome, and they don't have to be trained for it. They've had the spirit for it. Happy customers, happy shareholders, in that order. And literally flipping that triangle and telling the employees that's how it's going to go was step one. And then step two, there were only 2 steps, was asking the employees if they're up to it. Because if they're going to lead the way, they needed to now take the leadership position and own the products, own the services, own the customer behaviors, own the shareholder results, and not wait for somebody else or look up and say, it wasn't me. And it took a while to do that, but once and when we did, it was a forever change. And so effectively, what I'm saying here at the end was leading them was to give them the leadership position, coach them like a conductor, but not play any of the instruments. So I'll leave you with this. If you've ever been to an orchestra, a philharmonic, and I know you have some great ones where you all live, if you think about it, you arrive early, you listen to the preparation, and the music coming from the stage is horrible. It's just a bunch of noise. People are playing their parts, and there's riffs, and people are, tuning their bows or whatever. And then all of a sudden, it goes silent. And then this human being, with no credentials necessarily for that evening, walks across the stage to a thunderous applause. And with no evidence whatsoever that they can play a single instrument, they turn their back on you, hold a stick in the air, and with the downbeat of a stick, this amazing music comes out. And when it's over, by the way, the first applause goes to the person with the stick, only to be followed by those who actually did the work. So what's curious about that is what you're celebrating is this conductor, long before we met this person, this man or woman, must have rehearsed every one of those groups to a level of quality, and then, wait for it, coordinated them back together to create the music we got to hear. And so we're celebrating what was the work we couldn't see in the final product that we celebrated. And yet the leader never played a note. So perhaps the most humble of all leaders is to not have to play the instruments, but to take the risk of bringing them together for that kind of outcome. So Gigi, there are 3 topics. This first one is to talk about leadership and strategy, setting a path and not a goal. The other 2 we'll get into will be talent, and we'll talk a little bit about civility. But I thought we'd pause there because Lowell and Gigi thought this was the best way to have a conversation and see if you guys have examples to share like that or any thoughts that we can bring some more additional color to this topic. So I'll pause there.
Richard, maybe I could just start to prime the pump a little bit.
Smart idea.
Okay. But as a banker, right? There's a story here that how does somebody start as a teller and make it all the way to CEO? There's got to be some secret sauce that you have that would differentiate you over the 80,000 other people who would like to be CEO, right? How does that work?
Yeah, listen, I thank you for that. And I've had this answer all the time. It's being lucky and smart enough to know it. It's good to be smart, it's good to be lucky, but it's always smart enough to know when you're lucky. I mean, it was my good fortune, and we're all surrounded by different journeys in our life. But I will say what I just talked about, Lowell, we didn't set this up. I never, ever, ever set a goal for the next job, ever. And I remember as a young banker, because I went to college at night for 8 years while I was working at the bank, so I never got the more traditional path. But I cannot tell you how many of my peers at the bank took promotions when I took laterals. And I took lateral moves. I wasn't profoundly smart. I just wanted to learn more. I was voracious about learning more, and I thought I would be a banker for my life. So if you think about building a building, if you build a quick foundation, you build 2 stories, you're fine. But somebody says, if we could only build 2 more stories, you say, oh, I wish we could, but the foundation wasn't built for that. I spent most of my career, I can't even tell you how many steps I fell behind in my 20s from my peers going to these bigger jobs. And by the way, putting themselves and earmarking themselves in one kind of banking for the rest of their career. I just kept bouncing around at the bottom, taking whatever came along. I wasn't a bottom feeder, but I was willing to take whatever they gave me. And then by the time the opportunity was to move up, I was moving from a bigger base. And so that's where I come up with this, find a direction, not a goal, because the goal will limit you, because you're defining a goal today on something that hasn't happened yet. And by the time you get there, it may not even be relevant. So that's pretty much how my life worked out, but mostly smart enough to know how lucky I was with some amazing people around me. Any other thoughts on this, you guys? Okay, let's move to the second topic. I want to move to talent. And talent is, you can yawn now, you can roll your eyes at any time. How many more times can we talk about talent? And yes, we already know it's the most important thing, so that's off the side. The issue I'm going to say is what the talent, the people you have, what is our responsibility as leaders to get the best of them? And there's 2 ways to do that. One is to invest in them and to give them more skill so that their talent can flourish. And my big aha there is, don't guess what they need, ask them. That's going to be a theme here all the way. Just ask people what it is you want to learn more of so you can be better. But the talent I want to talk about is the other part, not giving them more, but getting more from them. So I'm going to take you back to about 4 years ago. There's a group at the national level called the Business Council. There's a Business Roundtable for advocacy, and some of you know that. There's a Business Council, which is more of a top 125 CEOs in corporate America who gathered 3 times a year to learn from each other. It's a highly unexpected outcome because everybody's a narcissist and nobody wants to listen to anybody. But in this one case, it seems to work. And so we were on a panel, a number of us talking to each other. And somebody said, what is it you value most about your senior leadership team in your Fortune whatever company? And it wasn't a direct answer. We started chatting about it. And we all agreed that in our early days, IQ was really the measure that was so valued because people's credentials, their degrees, the pedigree, where they went, what they learned, if they're published. And I admit that's what people measured first. And then I think we got more progressive, and somewhere in the 90s, the 2000s, we agreed, it's not just that, it's EQ that matters, which is that emotional quotient, that ability to read people and to listen better and to lead differently. And we all love that. And it seems so provocative and good for us. But this conversation was back in 2016, 17. And the conversation was, by de facto, we started developing the attributes of our best skilled leaders. And the aha was, they're the most curious people among us. And we surprised ourselves because the curious people are often not welcomed because they always challenge the status quo. They don't always do it well. And you're thinking, why can't we just get through this without people asking why? But they're also the ones most likely then to challenge the status quo. And when you are on a track, they're the ones who will help you agree that's the track that you should be on, not because it's de facto, but because there's not a better track. And so we started realizing, as if we were one big group, that we didn't cultivate curiosity enough. We valued it, but we really didn't say that we did. We never embodied it as a trait. We didn't celebrate somebody who, in the middle of a meeting, came up with a new idea, even if it was a little harebrained, but caused us to go a little differently. We didn't really stop and think about that. I can't think of a time, once again, that we're in right now, that I remember, we're celebrating curiosity and welcoming people to have not just varied ideas, but to have new, thoughtful, clever ideas. There's no reason we wouldn't want that now. The path is so uncertain. This is a case, back to my other story, where someone says, I've already been over that mountain range. I've done it 3 times in my life. It's a little bit faster, but there's a much better trip around the mountain this path. The map won't show it because it's giving you the fastest route, but this is a much better route. And if we want to spend the night, there's the most wonderful place to do it. And so I didn't ask for the fastest route, I just got it. But if somebody says you want the better route, ask me. And so the curiosity part of our leadership is more courageous because it welcomes, even at the last minute, which you don't want, a last minute idea. You'll say to somebody, I want your input, here's our thoughts. And you're really saying, we pretty much have baked this. I hope you don't have any changed thoughts because I really want to do it this way. And then someone says, how about this? And so my point is, go in with the listening option early. Set your path earlier than you normally would, and honest to God, let it not be final. Actually come to the conclusion just before it's final so you literally can make an adjustment and welcome it. And wait for it. Celebrate those who start to demonstrate the thoughtfulness and the passion that comes with, are you sure there's not a better way? Or can we think about trying this or that? And so what I'm saying about talent is not recruiting and not all of that. It's about introducing them to things that they want to do better, asking them what they want, and secondarily, giving them this sense that curiosity is now a welcomed attribute at your organization, and find places to pull it out and celebrate it so you get more of it. More often than not, it won't change the course, but it will make you realize that people are there on course on purpose, not because they inherited yours, because they thought about it and realized, yeah, it is the right path. And that's where followers follow, because they don't feel like they've been led. And so it's a small nuance, but it's something maybe to think about. Again, I would have talked about it a year ago, but it's even more profound now given what's happened in the world that we're at. And I have no idea how all of my employees feel about social justice unless I ask them. I don't know how they feel about what happened on January 6th and the succeeding couple of weeks without asking them. And I certainly don't have any idea how they're feeling about their safety on the coronavirus unless I ask them. And as you know, we've gotten pretty good at that. But the other 2 issues are out there and they're dangerous and they're met with all kinds of risk. And any good leader is going to take them on in the carefulness that comes with it, but not do it because of their fear. So I'll pause there. And maybe, Gigi, I'll go back to you and say, does any of that resonate for what you see in the cohort here at the MCCC?
I do see it. And I see a lot of our CEOs are managing in that direction. I think that our most successful leaders have had to find their way to that place, because as you're going through your career, you're not necessarily conscious that you're lucky, which I am a big fan of that. Your view on that, I share that view. I just feel that way as well. And I do think it was fun when you made the comment about people that are just so invested in their own ideas, they might be a little too impressed with their own thoughts, and how important it is for everybody on a team to be willing to hear the could we change this last thing? I know it's going to kill us. The deadline is yesterday, but it's not the best it can be. I mean, to be driven by that, wanting it to be the best it can be, all voices. I just think it's so important. And you have to, sometimes it's a lift because there's momentum to stay on a course, and you have to be willing to say, I'm not invested in being on time if it's wrong, if it's not the best it could be or the right thing. And I do see that. But I'd love to know what our board members are thinking about this. I see evidence. I see as they're pivoting. I see Ann Kademian. She's the director of universities at Shady Grove. It's part of University of Maryland. Ann, can you take yourself off?
Yeah. So Richard, thank you. This is just wonderful to hear you share this kind of comprehensive way of thinking that is so reassuring, especially at this time. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about, I'm a deep believer in this iterative kind of open approach as well. I think that right now we have to listen, adjust, find some consensus, move forward, listen, adjust. I think that resonates with me a lot. And so I'm really excited to hear you talk about it in such a way that is so helpful. I wonder, so much of our culture, though, we judge politicians and leaders on decisiveness. We judge people on how quickly they can make a decision or what's the answer right now. And, we've heard in the public health world, somebody, Dr. Fauci may make a comment one day, and then 10 days later, he has to adjust it because the times have changed, the information's growing. And then there's criticism, right? Because he's changed his mind. And so I think, while this approach, I think, is absolutely the way forward in these uncertain times, we operate in this context where we're always expected to know the answer and judged for knowing the answer. And so it's a complicated force, I think, to work against. I wonder if you can just talk about how you grapple with that and how it impacts the way that you approach this, wonderfully iterative approach that you're talking about.
Well, Anne, that's so well said, better than anything I said. So thank you for that. And I think we are kindred spirits. I'll give you my first example where the ability to lead is to step aside and lead from the side and not from the front. And there's criticism in that too, because people want decisiveness. And at the end of the day, you're not going to let us get off course, but at the end of the day, you're going to make sure it's done well. I want to give you an example. There's an old book called The Flight of the Buffalo. I don't know if anybody ever read it. The Flight of the Buffalo, there you go, Andrew read it. And there's the really great lesson learned, which is, buffaloes are like lemmings. And if the first buffalo were pushed over the cliff, they would fall all over the cliff. It talks about the geese, and you've looked at the sky, and you probably know this, but the geese always fly in an arrow formation. They always fly with one wing longer than the other in the arrow. And there's always one goose off to the outside wing watching from the back, the front, leading from behind. And then if you know this, the geese routinely pivot through, and then the lead goes back into the pack so that they don't have to lead the whole time. So effectively, they have taken the decision that we're all leading at different times, at different moments, but the best view is from the back where I can see further than you can because I can see the whole thing. And so what I would say is the answer to your question is sacrifice decisiveness and speed for sustainability and cooperative outcomes. And so I'm going to tell you a story with Leslie here. Make-A-Wish could not have been any more greatly impacted than any of you by COVID. It simply crushed our mission in the interim. We grant 16,000 wishes a year to children who have critical illnesses. Step number one, 44% of you, based on our studies, think that Make-A-Wish is the last wish of a dying child. And we are not. 44% of Americans still believe that to be the case. And while that's noble and wonderful, it's not true. We were many years ago pivoted to a charity for children who have critical diseases, which could be fatal or not, and to give them a moment, an incidence of hope and anticipation at the moment they're going through their therapies, with the belief that a community of strangers surround them with love and care to help them get through this. 71% of our children graduate to adulthood. So we don't measure success on life or death. We measure it on the moment and the impact of that time when they're going through this. All that to say is, when COVID hit, we discovered that wholly 90% of those 16,000 kids, either their wish involved air travel or travel to a destination of large gatherings like Disney, Super Bowl, things like that. 90% of our wishes. If you will, take 16,000 kids, take their Christmas wish and tear it up in front of them. Or tell them there is no Santa Claus, and keep them going. And Leslie and her team, remarkable, who knew they were going to be so good at this, pivoting to creating a whole new set of wish thinking, a whole new paradigm for waiting, keeping the kid excited and all of that. But here's the answer, Ann. We brought together our CEOs across the 60 chapters, Leslie, one of them, and said, you do this every day. The answer is we can't keep doing what we're doing. We can't fly them on planes. We can't get to Disney World. What should we do? And nobody came up with the idea but the CEOs themselves. Nobody told them the answer. Nobody coaxed them to the answer. They gathered together and said, we got this and we can figure this out. And I'm part of the national team, and my job was just give them all the resources they need and let them come to the conclusion. Because the fast answer would have been, let's give them a dictate, let's change some rules. And it would not have been sustainable, and it wouldn't have been owned because they would not have created that solution. And wait for it, Not everybody was at the table. So the only way those who weren't at the table would even slightly believe and trust the change was if it was their own peers that they trusted coming to that conclusion, not somebody from head office here to help. And so I use that as an example that we got to a solution later, and now a sustainable, predictable, repeatable, and strong solution from which we can keep going because all those who lead own it and are continuing to iterate it. And so the weakness would be me, not standing in and getting a faster solution. The strength would be standing aside and letting them come up with one that's going to be around for a long time and no longer months, but could be years. So I just say sustainability. If that's your goal, you can sacrifice all the criticisms that come in the interim, but as long as you hold true to that and can fend off what would otherwise be the vocal minority, I think you got a fighting chance.
Thank you so much.
Yeah,
That
thank
was
you.
really great. Yeah.
Leslie, do you want to add to that since I brought you in? You don't have to, just, you guys have done an amazing job.
I would just add in terms of talent, it honestly wasn't the CEOs that made these suggestions. It was our vice presidents, it was our coordinators, it was the people that communicate regularly with our wish families and our volunteers, that it bubbled really up from the people who are down in the weeds granting the wishes every day.
So it's even better. Thank you. That's even better. That's really sustainable because there's a lot of culture, there's a lot of beliefs, there's a lot of almost religious depth to how people feel. And for Leslie to say, we're no longer going to be able to give a child a wish to Disney World this year. And we don't want to wait 2 more years because the need for them is to have the wish in a timely way. She may be okay with it, her team may be okay with it, but then we have tens of thousands of volunteers to say, but I thought it had to be the one thing they wanted. And the answer is it is, but at a time that we can grant it. And so it's been very important because it's really religious. And if we didn't have the core making the decision, not the leaders, this simply wouldn't have any life to it at all.
Richard,
Any other thoughts on this? Yeah,
just one
please.
comment. It's Lowell again. One of the defining moments of my career was going to the University of Michigan to their leadership development program. And what I really liked about that was how well researched every piece of that was.
Yeah.
And one of the core founded the 4 kind of quadrants, but one of them that just resonates just as you spoke was if you know exactly where you're going, probably the strategies involved are more defined. If you don't know where you're going, you got to be, it's called the green quadrant, which is externally open. You got to be asking, constantly open to the stimulus around you, the ideas, other people, because it's not a known. Now, if I guess if you're a manufacturing process that something needs to be done, you can be pretty, operational controls and what have you. But if you don't, and I think most of us right now are more in the green kind of quadrant because they're just all the variables that are happening. You just can't define what the future is going to look like, right?
Well, that's brilliant. But I will tell you that a lot of us are in green, but a lot of people don't want to be in green and they're trying to stay out of it because it's an uncertain space. And that's where I think we have to, as old as we all might be, whatever your age is, how could you possibly have to change some of your most important leadership paradigms in 2021? Well, you do, because the world wasn't perfectly consistent over the course of your career. And this is the moment to do it. You guys are all engaged. You haven't retired yet, but maybe you have, like me, and started over. But at my very end of time, I was in the Minneapolis market. That's where we were headquartered. And so the University of Minnesota had 3 retiring CEOs, United Health, me, and Health Systems. And the 3 of us were on a panel for a bunch of grad students. And the question is, what's the one thing you would tell, your 30-year-old self today that you now know as you retire? And the 3 of us looked at each other, and believe it or not, not one of us had ever been asked that question. So we didn't have the canned answer in our head. And I remember when it came to me, I said, I've got an answer that just literally popped in my head, and I'm going to share it with you 30-year-olds, which is, when I was young, I had a strong intuition about things that came my way, business or otherwise. But as I was young, I was taught to subordinate my intuition and go find more facts. And in my old years, I realized that my intuition drove more of my decisions than extra fact finding and minimum fact finding. And at the end of the day, I wish I had known that earlier, because your intuition is amazingly powerful. and is a collection of all of your experiences in a way you can't articulate, but add that to some good old-fashioned facts and make a decision. And it's the old phrase, ready, aim, fire, not ready, aim, 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 maybe never fire. And I would tell that to all the younger kids because it's rather like not picking pick a direction, not a goal. But I'm telling you, your intuition is your thing. And if we're lucky enough to be older like me in 2021, where you actually have this well-earned wisdom, don't let it serve as a central cement to keep you where you are. No one's asking you to be steady in a wind. They want you to move with the wind and use that wisdom to get us to the next place. And it's a very interesting paradigm because to be older is to be, I'm supposed to be the strength, back to I think Gigi's point, the one that has the answer, or to your point, Ann. And instead, I'm going to go with you to go find the answer, but I have a better sense of where to go to find it. Let's find it together. It's a remarkably important, powerful statement. And that green quadrant, which I do know about, is theoretical until it's not. And when it's real, it's really hard to get people into it, and they want out as fast as they can. Even though I like green. All right, let's move to the last one. And this is going to be right up there with world peace. So you hate me for even trying to tackle it, but the topic's culture. And what I said in my little notes for you guys was civility, multiculturalism, and decency. So let's start with civility. Civility is like pornography, and I say this in that you know it when you see it, but it's hard to define. And civility comes from the word civic, and civic emanates from the community and the commune of people working together effectively and successfully. And civility was intended to do it with equal respect, for no regard for caste systems or anything that would otherwise impugn somebody's worthiness as an equal member of the society. Now, we've messed that up squarely over the generations, but what's so brilliant about some of the things that are happening today, particularly in diversity, equity, and inclusion? And forget about the ethnic or gender parts of it. We're starting to get back to everyone has an equal voice. Everyone's had as many days on this earth as their age represents, and they have experiences and stories to tell. And nobody earned their way to a bigger microphone or a bigger bully pulpit because of any success in perhaps a business world or a financial way. That is moving towards civility. But I'll tell you, the first act of civility is for those who have the anointed power to give it back and to share it and to step down from the bully pulpit and share that voice. And that is not easy because we were all raised, most of us were raised with work hard, do well, be successful, make money, have high grand successes, and have a great retirement party. But I'll tell you guys this, if you read David Brooks has a book called The Road to Character. And David has I'm actually not even a big fan of his, but I read some of his stuff, and he has The Road to Character has a chapter dedicated to life's descriptions. And he talks about leading your life in a resume way or eulogy way. The resume way is Richard Davis went to this school, had this many kids, written this many honors, worked at this many companies, and that's Richard. And if I'm going to interview Ann or Eddie or Andrew, I do need to know that data. But you and I know when we do an interview, I read the stuff and I want to get to know you. That stuff's just over there. It's like table stakes. The resume eulogy says you live and think of your life as accomplishments and a succession of almost Maslowian, up the pyramid. The eulogy way of living your life, which the parentheses is it's never too late because you're not dead, is to live it in a more character way. So by show of hands, how many of you have ever given a eulogy? Okay, it's the single hardest thing I have ever done in my life. And I've done 4, and one of them actually was at the National Cathedral not far from your city, for a remarkable leader of the banking community. From the air pulpit, I called the pulpit's like hanging out in the air by itself. A eulogy is impossible because you have 9 to 11 minutes to fully characterize a human being, wait for it, in front of everyone who desperately wants you to get it right. I mean, they just want you not to forget that part, and don't forget that part, and don't forget that part. But what you find yourself saying in a eulogy, and by the way, you'll all smile if you've done this, there's no good eulogy.com. There's no great tricks to a eulogy. You got to think it through. But what you find yourself saying is, Erin lived her life in the following way. Gigi represented in the way she treated people the following character. Leslie chose a big part of her life not only to be a wish granter, but to lead others to that same outcome. Not where you worked, not how many things you had, who cares about what awards you got. It's living your life with purpose. And some would say, and this is a PS, and with the intent to have a legacy. I don't believe that last part, but you're welcome to it. I think you contribute while you're here, and if you've left anything, you leave it through the people. But either way, what you do while you're here matters. And so I leave it to you guys to think about how you can lead in a more eulogy way. It's not about accomplishments. It has to be certain things in the business world, but it's how you did it that mattered. That's what people are going to remember, how you did it. And as it relates to being important, I would ask you right now, if I asked you to think about the one person in your life that had the biggest impact on your professional world, could you think of them? It could be your mom, could be your coach, could be a colleague. Could you think of them? And I'm going to tell you this story because mine is Cindy Busby. Cindy is this woman who was a branch manager when I was a teller. And I was working during the day, going to school at night, voracious cross-trained. I wanted to learn everything I could. She walked over to me one day and she goes, Richard, I've been watching. I think you ought to go into the management training program here at this very large bank. That's all. I said, clearly you don't know my story. I said, I'm going to school so I can be an economist. I said, I'm not going to be a teller. And she goes, no, I want to put you in the training program. I see some real opportunity. And I said, no. She said, yes. I finally abdicated because it was a little more money per hour. At the end of the day, she was the first person when I least expected it that believed in me in a way that I didn't even know I had a shot at something. And she saw a future that I didn't even know was in my life. I tell this story because I've never found her since. I've always wanted to tell her that. And number one, if you have thought of someone in this last few minutes and you haven't told them that when asked, you thought of them first, do it. Because I would kill to be able to go and tell Cindy, I believe she's gone. The second piece is, how about you being Cindy Busby? You can do it more than once. You can be that person in the middle of a remarkably busy circumstance. You all of a sudden pause and think, God, I don't know, Pete is amazing. I can't even believe how many good things. I should tell Pete that. And I want Pete to know, if nothing else, I'm noticing, and keep up the good work. And then maybe, what do you want out of here? I'm your boss, Pete. What do you want out of this career? And Pete, no one's ever asked. And you find it out, and then but it all happens. But don't just pass by all the off ramps and don't stop along the way. Stop every once in a while, take a break, see what's going on, meet people, and impact their lives. Because at the end of the day, I remember in my eulogy, the one that I remember the most, I remember standing, it was my pastor, get that, you guys, swear to God, Tabernacle Choir behind me for that event, and having to spin around and talk in both ways. And what I was able to say most about this particular man, of all the things you'd expect to say about a pastor, was I said, he kept looking for opportunities to change people's lives. Not better them, not help them along, not just get them across the street, not just give them directions, but get them to where they're going. And that is, I don't think he ever knew he did that. I think some people would think he's supposed to because he's a shepherd, he's a pastor. But I walked away thinking, man, do I do that enough? Because the most powerful thing with civility, back to my rounding out here, is that there's no casteism. There's no sense of hierarchy. Everyone has a story to tell, a story to be told, and a contribution somewhere along the way. And to be asked your opinion, OMG, there's nothing greater. There's no higher regard than for somebody to want your thoughts. So I singular that out because I think we think of civility as just being cordial. And authentic is the other part of it, because you can be passive aggressive and it's a horrible outcome. It looks good, it sounds good, it transcribes well, and there's nothing legitimate about it. And so make sure that civility comes in the form of really meaning it and believing it. And the last thing I'll pivot to, so I don't outstay my welcome, is decency. How great is that word? In fact, can you think of a word that conjures up more just generally positive, elementary thoughts about being human? Decency is to be in the presence of, it's to act in giving it, and it's to recognize when it's been given. Decency is just one of those great words because it holds up all the character fabric and morals that we all believe in as just good humans, no matter what your religious or political beliefs. Decency carries above all. It's like the biggest umbrella. Everything follows under that. The way you treat people, the way you behave, the way you parent, the way you lead. And then decency, lastly, has this wonderful sustaining belief that it feels like bedrock. If you want to build on something, you want to build on something sturdy and firm. If you go choose your foundation on a bed of decency, there is no better place to start, because it will cover everything. And it's a word we rarely use. It's a very powerful word that if you bring it particularly in front of your employees and ask them to ask yourself if this is decent, the right way to do it. At the bank, Lowell will appreciate this. When I ran the bank, we had all kinds of concerns about employee treatment and make sure that customers were treated well. And so I had very few things I created, by the way. I'm not real creative, but I did create the grandmother clause. And 80,000 people knew about the grandmother clause. And it was, if you wouldn't give it to, hand it to, or sell it to your grandmother, we're not doing it. And I remember along the way, people said, well, why would you pick grandmother? I said, well, not everybody likes their parents, but everybody likes their grandmother. I'm pretty sure. I mean, nobody doesn't like grandma. And I use that as a decency quotient without ever knowing that word, because it says we should never expect of ourselves anything we wouldn't expect of others. And mostly, if grandma shouldn't, wouldn't, couldn't use it or take it in a business where you're selling stuff, we're not going to do it. And it just transcended everything. So I ask you guys to think in culture. Culture usually comes out as a set of words or kind of almost a doctrine of we'll behave well, we will use the following words, our mission and vision statements say all these nice things. That's a good start. But if you just seek decency and hold everyone accountable to it, because we all have the ability to control that, there's a remarkable empowerment that I believe you'll find. And it starts to come into your head and you start making decisions just a little more clearly. Because decency, by the way, is one of the most powerful words you could give at a eulogy, because it summarizes the quality of the person and the life they led. So all that to say, this comes together at a time, and I'm closing here, you're welcome, that in a world that's confusing anyway, where we've had this remarkable social injustice that we need to stand up and defend vigorously, and Black lives do matter, we need to stand for that and let that be a proxy for all the civility that comes with it. We need to understand that this political disruption is disturbing and it's disappointing. It's even embarrassing. And yet let's not talk about it. Let's fight for it and do what we've done for 240 years. And then lastly, with this remarkable COVID, I close because you will look back one day and say, did I like how I handled myself during the uncertainty? And oftentimes you'll say, no, because I was so caught up in the uncertainty, I was afraid to have a position or to set a direction or to start leading. We're deep in the middle of this thing. You're going to look back in a year and say, did I lead well during this uncertainty? And you can still do it. You can still lead well. But it's to hear what people need, deliver that support to them, make them feel your care and their community, and be the one that they'll follow. Because your followers will take on leaders, but you will not be a leader without those who will follow you. And it's not a matter of asking them to follow you. It's providing that level of credibility and authenticity that will allow them to get behind you. And then, when right, step to the side, lead from the side, and every once in a while, like the goose will teach you, lead from the back. It's a great view, and you'll see just how much work you've either accomplished or what you have to do when you get back to the front. So, Gigi, I really have outstayed my welcome, but I'm so grateful for this opportunity. You flatter and honor me by being asked, and I'm forever going to be grateful. So thank you for that.
We are so
Wonderful presentation. What a wonderful
This was
presentation.
incredibly inspirational. I so appreciate your remarks. I'm grateful for the time that you were willing to spend with Lowell and me in advance of this. So we really are the lucky ones. And I just wondered, I know we're just minutes away from the end of our time, and I just wanted to know, Lowell, do you have any closing remarks you'd like to make?
No, I think, Richard, thank you very much. I mean, I've been getting a series of emails as you've been speaking, saying how inspirational you are and how well timely this discussion's been. So,
Thank you.
All my gratitude and thank you. It's very
And
inspirational.
And Lowell knows a person at Make-A-Wish, and if you don't mind, Gigi, I want to go back and close there. the last thing I would ask you to, I guess, to do, and it's not just for Make-A-Wish, but wherever you are in your life right now, if you've been waiting to spend time and go get the thread and be the needle of that fabric in this community and get involved in a not-for-profit, promise me, do it. It doesn't get better later. It's not going to find its way to you eventually. The richness of your life will be remarkable. And I mean, it can be the food bank, and it can be working at the church, and it can be Catholic charities. We would love it to be Make-A-Wish. I'm so grateful for Leslie and all that she stands for. She's also a Wish mom, so she has a remarkable lens into what it means to be a Wish partner. But I want you to be inspired, not just by Make-A-Wish, but I promise you guys, as you go out of your home the next time you leave, because I was going to say when you drive home, but I know you're there, you will pass through numbers of buildings, not unlike Lowell walking by the building that Leslie's in. Don't just notice it as a building, notice that inside some magic's happening. And it's the reason all you can be in Montgomery County being successful, because all those hidden threads are keeping everything together. And it's people like Leslie who are making that happen in the real world, and embrace them, celebrate them. Join. Ben, thank you for being on our board. If you're part of any other organization like that, you're doing great work. And in my mind, that's the form of character that's in and above the job you've all been given, the vested responsibilities that we take every single day. So thank you for also shining a light on Make-A-Wish, letting it be a proud part of your community. And Gigi, anytime you can, let Leslie come back and give the opportunity for her to share her thoughts.
It would be my pleasure to do that. And thank you so much, Richard. This was just so inspirational, and it's really was what we needed at the time we needed it. So thank you very much. I don't want to thank all of our board members. We have amazing guests that joined us today. My team, who made sure today happened smoothly without a hitch, as always. The whole gang is on. And I just want to say thank you to everybody. We will make a recording available. And we also, I've got Leslie's contact information. So when we send out a post-event email, I'll be sure that everybody receives that as well. So that you can follow up and learn more from her directly. And I'm excited to be connected to her now in our community. With that, I want to, I want to assure you, Richard, that our board members are those people that care about that connecting fabric. That's with us. Absolutely.
I believe you, because I think I'm always going to believe everything you say. You're amazing, and your enthusiasm is contagious. So thank you for that leadership.
Well, thank you, and back at you. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I believe it's to you to adjourn us.
Yes, let's please adjourn the meeting, and one last thank you, Richard.
Of course. Thanks, guys.
Very good.
Thank you.
Good night, everyone.
Thank you very much. Awesome.